Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me. For I am meek and lowly in heart, and you shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke easy and my burden is light. Isn't that great? I want to go back this morning to Ephesians chapter 5. I'm going to start some things starting in verse 1. I'm not going to preach the sermon, but I have some things I want to say, okay? Actually, to do it right, should start at verse 1 and go to verse 17. But you don't have time for that today, okay? That'd take me 2 hours and a half. Anybody want to stay that long? I didn't think you did. When I was in Africa, I had a Sunday morning service. My wife had the ladies meeting over here, okay? I had the men over here. I would start in the morning at 10 o'clock. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I had to say, fellas, go home. I can't talk anymore. Now, you talk about a man that could preach all the time, I could do it. I'm going to say something to you this morning. Stop fretting about the wickedness in the world. You see, crazy pastor? No, I'm not. We worry about the wickedness in the world when we should be looking at us and say, what am I going to do? How am I going to live? What's my life going to amount to? I want you to look at verse 1 of Ephesians chapter 5. Several things I'm going to point out, then I'm going to move on. Be therefore followers of God as dear children and walk in love. Look down at verse 6. Let no man deceive you with vain words. Look at verse 8. Now there's light in the world, walk as children of light. Verse 10, proving what is acceptable unto the Lord. Verse 11, have no fellowship with unfruitful works of darkness. When sometimes preachers get so busy trying to provide a message, they forgot to see what the message is. I'm saying to you, this message is personal. Everything in this message today is personal for me and for you. So we're moving now to our second walk that Paul asked us to do. Last week I talked about walking in love, okay? Today I want to talk about walking in light. We're going to walk in light because we're saints. I'm going to read some more in just a minute, okay? And by the way, I'm going to give you several scriptures. I'm not going to have you turn in here, there, and yonder. But you get a pencil and write them down and go home and look them up. If I read all the scriptures, it'd take you 4 hours to get it done. So just think about it. Now, we're to walk in light. It's pretty simple, isn't it? If it turned off all the lights in here, covered all the windows, it'd be dark, wouldn't it? I don't like walking around in the dark. I drop things on the floor at my house. You know how I find them? Anybody know how I find them? I get up at night barefooted and walk around in the dark, and I find them every time. What are you laughing about? Everybody here does it, and they think you think it. But sometimes I do it on purpose. Let me say it to you. I don't like walking in the dark. I don't like living in the dark. When we were in Africa, we slept under the Milky Way every night, right over our bed. You could look up to the Milky Way. You talk about stars, Star Wars, we saw it every night. Beautiful. But when you're traveling in Africa, a lot of times, you don't have that. And when it gets dark, it's really dark, folks. I mean, the sun goes down out there in the desert. One minute it's bright light, the next minute it's dark, you can't even see. I don't like darkness. I don't like to think about darkness. I don't like to talk about the things in the darkness. I got to get on. So we are saints, and saints need to walk in light. We are set apart. We no longer belong to the darkness. In verses 3 and 4, that we don't belong to that darkness anymore. We've been called out of the darkness into His light to show forth the praise of him who hath called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Let me say to you, it's beneath the dignity of the child of God to indulge in sins and belong to the world of darkness. And some are mentioning here, fornication, uncleanness. Now, I know I mentioned them last week, but they're so prevalent in our society today that they invade every part of our lives to try to keep us from walking in light. You can say what you like. You can't turn on your radio. You can't turn on your television. You can't pick up a newspaper without finding a bunch of filth right on the front page. And that's the world we live in. But you don't have to live in that. Now, then there's this thing of covetousness. You say, what are you talking about? Covetousness. I think that's a blatant sin of America today. Everybody is wanting something more. I want this, I want that. I talked to a young man the other day. He said, well, I want this. I said, what do you want it for? He's wanting a new car. I said, go ahead and buy you one. Don't ask me to help you pay for it. He wasn't one of my kids, just a young man talking to me. I'm just saying, covetous is the sin of America today, wanting things all the time. By the way, covetousness is not just things. It covers a lot of other areas. It can be wanting to be recognized, wanting to be famous. But I want to say to you, it's impossible to walk in light and live in covetousness at the same time. God always gnawing away at you. Men took me to a place several months ago, took me to a store. Last time I've been to a big store. And he took me, got out, he said, what do you think about it? I said, well, it's nice, but I didn't see a thing I wanted. He said, what? I said, I didn't see a thing I wanted. I want to tell you something, folks. We need to get to the place that we don't see anything we want. You say you're crazy. No, I'm not. I tell you what, if we have food to eat, a place to sleep, we ought to be content with a house to live in. We don't need a lot else. In verse 4 of chapter 5 here, it's the problem of the tongue. By the way, the problem of the tongue is a problem of the heart. For out of the abundance of what? The heart, the mouth speaks. Now, it's a strange thing, but in verse 4, the sins in verse 4 are tied to the sins in verse 3. People who have a base, vile filth in life like to jest about it. They like to brag about it. People that indulge in sexual sins, first thing you know, they get to talking about it and want to brag about it. Jesting. This word jesting. Do you know what it means? This word jesting comes from a word that means to turn easily. It suggests a person that can take a conversation of any kind and turn it into some kind of filth. And we have a world full of them. There was a time when you could turn your radio and nobody used a 4-letter word on the radio. Do you know it? But you can't do that today. The language of people on the radio is filthy. By the way, my radio will only pick up one station in my car, and I'm glad. It won't pick up anything else. I found a station the other day. It's supposed to be in gospel music. My Lord, I used to hear the thing coming out of the nightclubs in Africa. They call it Christian music. You can call it what you want to. But it's not Christian, and it's not music either. Jesting. Now, you know what Paul said? He said for us in verse 4, but rather giving of thanks. Thank God we've been delivered from darkness. Thank God He delivered us from a filthy mouth. I got to hurry on. How about foolish talking in verse 4? That's not talking about good humor. Now, I love good humor. My wife used to say about me, he's funny but doesn't have a sense of humor. You remember her, don't you? She had that little tongue and say that. She did pretty well. And I like it. But you know what? We don't need to be using language that's not good to hear It's not good for the ears, not good for the mind, not good for the brain. In verse 24, verse 29, verse 4, it tells us to keep our mouths clean. Look at verse 29 up there. Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is what? Good to the use of edifying, that it may minister grace to the hearers. What comes out of your mouth? What kind of language you use every day? Now, I want to say something to you this morning. I may be one of the oldest people in the house, but I want to tell you I have as much temptation right now as I did when I was 20 years old. You said, what? You know what my temptation is now? You're old. Nobody cares about what you do. Just do anything you want to do. That's the temptation I face every single day. I must get 1,000 phone calls a week of people wanting to sell me something, and it's filth. I got where now, if I don't know the number, I don't even answer it. I just let it go by. I'm going to say to you, we need to be careful with our lives. The older you get, doesn't mean you're going to get less temptations. I get more now about that stuff than I ever did. Now, we're to walk in light because we're kings. Verse 4 and 5. That tells us we've been brought out of that kingdom of the Satan into God's kingdom. Born again. Except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. Because we're waiting till the full revelation. When Jesus comes again, we're going to really have a good time. I'm looking forward to it. I'm not, you say, are you in a hurry? I'm so old I can't hurry anymore. I walked to the mailbox the other day and one of my neighbors saw me. It wasn't this neighbor, it was another neighbor on the other side. Young fellow about 20 years old, he said, Mr. Harp, do you need help? I said, I do. What do you think? He said, you're walking mighty slow. You know what I said? I'm beating you. You're sitting on a truck. Let me say to you, folks, Jesus is coming. 2 Timothy chapter 4 tells us that he'll judge the quick and the dead at his appearing in his kingdom. Galatians chapter 5, verse 21, Paul makes it clear that no person who practices and lives persistently in sin will share in God's kingdom. You can mark it down. You say, I'll get by. You're not going to get by. If your life consists of the things listed in these verses, you're not going to heaven. You see, you judge me. I'm just telling you what God said. Now, in Paul's day, there were false Christians, and there are plenty of them today, who argue that believers can live in sin and get away with it. We have those same kind of deceivers today, and many of them are pastoring churches. They say since we're saved by grace, we can sin continually, and God's grace will override and clean us up. But Romans chapter 6, verse 1 and 2 says, God forbid, it's not going to happen. What shall we say then? Shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? God forbid. Now, we're to walk in light, folks, because we are light. Verse 7 through 14. By the way, this is the heart of this whole passage. This is the heart of the first verses. This is the heart of all these verses right here. We're to walk in light. For you were sometimes darkness, verse 8, but now are you light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 14 through chapter 7, verse 1, explains very vividly the contrast between people who walk in light, who belong to God, and people of the world. I'm not going to take time to read it, but I want you to read those verses. 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 14 and following. God does not say, and Paul doesn't say in this writing here, that we were in darkness. Look at verse 8, what he says. For ye were sometimes darkness. We were darkness. Everybody here at one time or another, you were dark as my black shoes. Somebody asked me today, why do you wear black shoes all the time? I said, because I don't have to worry about socks to match them. I've been wearing the same kind of shoes for 75 years. So what kind are they? The kind that fits my foot. Let me tell you, folks, it's time to enjoy life. Don't get tied up in all the things here. And I don't want you to do that today. I want you to remember, God is asking us in these verses to have a light every day that glorifies God. It's not talking about something that's going to happen 50 years from now. It's talking about right now. Listen, we're to walk in light because we are light. You can't be in darkness and in light at the same time. Look at verse 9. For the fruit of the Spirit is in all goodness and righteousness and truth. Now, it's almost like that verse just stuck in there. But you know what it's saying? It's the Spirit of God in us that is the light. That's the only light we have. Somebody in this church 15 years ago or more gave me a handful of little flashlights. They hold one battery. No, they hold 3 batteries. But they're about the size of my little finger. I thought, I'll throw those things away. After a while, I didn't want to change the batteries. Little old bitty batteries and things. But I kept them, and guess what? Now that I'm by myself, I'm glad to have those little flashlights. I put one in my chair pocket every night. I put one in my pajama pockets the other night. And guess what? When I walk up in the night, I don't have to worry about turning on. I get one, I'm out. Guess what? That little light makes the whole room feel like I'm in a whole room of light, not darkness. We don't have to have a big light. We just need the light we have shine. That's all we need. Just let it shine. You like that song? The kids used to sing it? This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. By the way, now you folks been here long enough, you know I love to sing. Well, I can't carry a tune in a bucket. I know a note from a bird on the fence, but I love to sing. You know why? There's a light in here that wants to come out. Sometimes I just want to. I went to a place that I was humming. I didn't know it. This lady says, what do you do for a living? I said, I'm retired, ma'am. She said, I know, but have you been a preacher or something? I said, yeah. She said, do you know what you do? I said, you're the humming Amazing Grace. Good Lord. My wife used to love singing Amazing Grace. I go down some morning. She didn't know anything going on, but she'd say, let's sing Amazing Grace. And she'd just start singing. And my wife was not a singer. She never did much singing. She used to hum a lot. I'm just saying, you folks, we need to have something. When it's inside, it's going to come out sooner or later. I got to get on with this. Just say you can't walk in darkness and light at the same time. The Spirit of God inside you will not let it. By the way, the Spirit of God produces goodness, and it produces righteousness. Goodness has to do with love in action. Righteousness has to do with the rightness of character before God and the rightness of action before men. Jesus had a lot to say about darkness, light and darkness. He said, let your light so shine before men, they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. Matthew chapter 5, verse 16. When I went off to Africa, a friend of mine, gave me a wallet. And on the back of that wallet, that verse was stamped. And I had that thing in Africa till I wore it out. I used to take it out and look at it, and I'd read it every day. Take it out and look at it, read that verse every single day. Because God sent me out there to let my light shine. That's all I went for. Listen. Jesus said, let your light shine, but he also told us in John chapter 3, verse 20 and 21, that everyone who does evil hates the light. They won't come to the light because their deeds of wickedness and sin is exposed. But people who do truth come to the light so that the light can expose their work done in God and let the world see it. Now you need to write this one down. To walk in life means to live before the eyes of God without trying to hide anything. To walk in light means to live before the eyes of God without trying to hide anything. That's our apology, by the way. I'm just telling you what it is. We may be able to hide things from men, but we can't hide anything from God. So what am I saying to you? We just as well as confess our sins and get it over with. And I'm not saying, Lord, here's my sins in the bottle. Lord, I ask forgive me. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about get down to the nitty-gritty of confessing those things you know are hindering you from serving God and walking with Him. That's the thing we need to do. By the way, don't get me wrong, but I don't like a lot of public praying. You know why? We won't say what God tells us on our heart we need to pray about. We'll say, well, they might think this, we might think that. You know when you get down to praying, when you're by yourself at night, there's nobody around but you and God, and the burden is so heavy you can't bear it, then you really get down to talk to God, and He'll show you what's wrong in your life. Then you begin to walk in light. You can't hide things from God. Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 13, if you want to write it down. All things are naked and open unto the eyes of Him with whom we have to do. I'm going to bring this to close pretty soon. When we walk as children of light, we reveal God's light in our daily lives. We did it by our character and by our conduct. You say, well, it doesn't matter how I do. Our character and our conduct both. It tells people who we are and what we're doing in our lives. When we bring God's light into a dark world, we help others to find their way to Christ. The mind of the unsaved person is blinded by sin and by Satan. Light in a darkened world expresses what's wrong, but it also reveals God, and it produces light and produces fruit. The light produces fruit. Do you know you can't grow a crop without fruit? Except mushrooms. Now, most people know, but I love mushrooms. But I don't like to cook them. You know why? I'm always afraid I get one that's poison. And by the way, they'll kill you. We had a mushroom out there in Africa. It looks all the world like an edible mushroom, but you take that thing and put it in your mouth, in 2 minutes you're dead. Kills you. Be careful about darkness and what grows in darkness. Light reveals the truth. Light exposes the real individual and their characters. That's why the unsaved person will stay away from the Bible and stay away from church. When we walk in light and we refuse the fellowship of darkness, we expose the dark things of sin and what they really are. Jesus said, I am the light of the world. John chapter 12 and verse 41. He also said, ye are the light of the world, Matthew chapter 5 verse 14. By the way, you need to mark this down. His life and his conduct exposed the sinfulness of the religious leaders of his day, and that's why they hated him. They didn't hate him because he healed people. They didn't hate him because they hated him because his life exposed who they were. And by the way, when we walk in light, our conduct and our character will expose sinfulness, and we will be hated. You see what? Oh, yeah. Brother Kent Boyd and I used to go some places together. I never met a man like Kent Boyd. I won't never meet another one like him. He's more fun than a barrel of monkeys. But we'd go in a place and hear people say, there's Kent Boyd again. You know what it meant? Kent already been there and talked to him about the Lord. That's exactly what it meant. Of all things, I never went to a place that I didn't see, he didn't see somebody. We were standing in the airport in Israel getting ready to come back from Israel. Brother Kent said, preacher, I believe I know that guy over there. I said, Kent, you ain't know anybody. He said, I believe I know that guy. He said, that fellow said, Kent Boyd, are you still cutting meat in Carrollton? I thought, my Lord, have mercy. You never knew. But what a great man. By the way, if it hadn't been for Kent Boyd, I wouldn't have stayed here. God has a way of giving you men to work with you. Did you know that? I wouldn't mean to brag on Kent, but I was thinking about him last night. All the good times we had together. I thought about the lady way down in the backwoods of Heard County. Had a lady ask us to go down and see her. I said, why don't your pastor go see him? She said, my pastor don't visit people. Kent and I got in the car and we drove all the way over 3/4 way to Franklin. The road went all back in the woods, about 2 miles back in the woods back there. Here this lady laying on the bed, had cancer. She was dying. And I told Kent that day, I said, bring your guitar, Kent. And I said, go get your guitar. He came in, he started singing Amazing Grace. He began to let his light shine, and guess what? That lady said, I've been waiting on somebody to come to him and see about me. He sung Amazing Grace, and I knelt down by that lady's bed, told her how to be saved. And she said, I really need that. I want to trust Christ as my Savior. Oh, listen, what a great thing to let your light shine. By the way, we are the light of the world. Verse 10 and 11 of this chapter is telling us to live balanced lives. Positively, we're to prove what's acceptable to the Lord. Negatively, we're to denounce, expose the wickedness of those in darkness. But it's not enough to expose wickedness. It's not enough to expose darkness. We have to bear fruit. Verse 12 is a strange verse, but it's like a yellow light. Anybody know what the yellow light on these signals out here mean? What's the yellow light mean? Huh? It means danger of coming. You're supposed to slow down. You're not supposed to speed up. But verse 12 is a yellow light. For it's a shame even to speak of those things which are done of them in secret. See what I'm talking about? We're to have a light. We're to give witness for Christ. We're to have a life that witnesses for Christ. But we need to be careful about our testimony. The method of our day seems to be just tell everything. Now, I don't know how many of you do Facebook, and I don't care. I don't do it. I had it one day for 30 minutes. In 30 minutes, I decided I didn't need that garbage. The method of our day is tell everything. And people tell everything, what I understand. Listen, some preachers do that. They revel in the sensational so much that their sermons excite the appetite and give to innocent more information they need. Here in verse 12, Paul said, it's a shame to even speak of those things done in secret. It's a dangerous policy, people, to overexpose the filthy things of darkness because we risk advertising and promoting sin. In Romans chapter 16 and verse 19, Paul said to the church at Rome, I would have you wise into that which is good and simple concerning evil. You don't have to do a lot. Just be simple. A man in France every time said, you're too simple-minded. I said, what about you? He said, but you have things that are too simple. I said, that's the only way I know to be. Just simple believe God. We don't need to discuss every facet of sin and wickedness when we give a testimony. Some people think we should read and study the awful things written by wicked men in order to understand those men. But you don't need to perform an autopsy on a rotting corpse to know that it stinks. Just turn on the light. That's what it's talking about in verse 13. Whatsoever does make manifest is light. Your light is your life. In verse 14, when we think of light, we think of the beginning of a new day. And that's what's pictured in verse 14. Verse 14, Paul takes Isaiah chapter 60, verse 1 and 2, and applies it to you and me today. By the way, you can read that. You'll try to figure out what it means. If you don't know, come and see me. I'll tell you what it means. We're no longer in darkness. The darkness of the graveyard is behind us. I used to load my truck up with dead people out there in Africa. One time I had 9 bodies on the back of a pickup truck hauling to the graveyard. We got to the graveyard. It was a hole in the ground. They put them in there. And the Muslims sit like this over a grave, hold hands. You know what they're doing? They're saying, heck, God put something in my hands in a place of one that's died. They didn't have a hope. That's the way the world is today. Let me talk to you folks. We no longer live in darkness. Romans chapter 13, verse 11 through 14. We are admonished to wake out of sleep, cast off the works of darkness, put on the armor of light, and walk honestly in the day. A little bit of honesty in America would help, wouldn't it? 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 1 through 10, we are told that we're the children of light. We're not of the night, nor of darkness. We're not asleep like people in the dark rooms. I have trouble sleeping. I went to see a doctor here. I said, tell me how to get some sleep. He said, well, just turn off all the lights and go to sleep. I said, my mama told me that 75 years ago. I don't know how to do it, but you know what? We need to put on the armor of light every day. We need to stop worrying about the world around us and just live what God has given us to live. You can't change everybody around here, but you can put a light on what they're doing. Salvation is the beginning of a new day. We ought to live like people who belong to the light, not the darkness. Listen, the believer is a saint. He's a partaker of the inheritance of the saints in light. Colossians chapter 1, verse 12. He's not only a saint, he's a king. He's been delivered from the power of darkness, translated in the kingdom of God's dear Son. And by the way, I'm not going to finish the message this morning. I take it for another month, okay? But I'm going to close right now. Beloved, we are to walk in light. We must walk in love, must walk in light because we're the light of the Lord. Do otherwise would be disastrous to us personally and injurious to the body of Christ. Anytime you give yourself over to the darkness of this world, you're injuring this church. You say, oh, I'm just telling you what God says. We need to stop pretending, get down to business, let the world go by, live for Jesus, And reach out in the world as it goes by and grab one and bring them in. Just bring them in. That's the only way you can do it. Let's pray.